Are we the first ones to do the Shiva, or somebody else has already done one webinar?
Done one earlier, which is just with Vaidi, explaining the curriculum largely of the entire DJAD, and so you are the first one from a specific faculty.
Okay.
So I'm the one who's kind of continuing the entire lot. So I'm talking to you today, and next Saturday with Sarita, and eventually with Michael Foley, and so on. So I'm kind of covering ground from interior design, communication design, and industrial design, and so on.
Nice. So you'll be the host.
I will be the host. That's right.
And your background is communication design, is it?
I've been in communication design, same batch, around the same time as Sarita, and same batch as Vaidi, but eventually I moved off to do user experience design, and now I run a product company, which is it's between Dallas and here in Bangalore. So we are actually building an AI product, which is a talent intelligence product of sorts. So that's what I do. I mean, other than that, I run this conference called Design Up, which is a kind of a known conference, but it's at the intersection of design and technology.
Right.
So because I've been in that cohort for a very long time now. So that's what we do. I guess that's what qualified me in the eyes of Vaidi and Sarita to kind of come in and talk to people.
Right. Nice. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think we have too many interior design students at this moment, but Vaidi seems to be intent on building that group. Is it? Vaidi?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we do want to grow that with specialized faculty and also with inputs from you, and build that discipline over a period of time.
Right. I think it makes sense. There's a lot of overlap with your other streams.
Yeah. So now we have a full-time faculty who's going to be in charge of interior, and she would be basically expanding the specialization.
Nice. She has joined already?
She's joining on the June 6th.
Yeah, cool.
And we also have one more person who has done his undergraduation in architecture, and he's done his master's in animation. So he's also somebody. He can also contribute in furniture design.
That's a good thing.
And lighting.
Cool. I think we should kick this off. Let's. So the idea is that this conversation will be recorded and it will be available as a webinar online, as a YouTube content online. And so quickly introducing myself, my name is Siva Viswanathan, and I've been a practicing designer for the past 3 decades and a little more. I'm a visiting faculty at DJAD for communication design. While I'm a practitioner as a director of Design Up, a community and a conference, I also run a technology firm between Dallas and Bangalore that makes a talent intelligence product called as Maya.ai. When you guys get time, you can take a look at it. I'm excited to welcome everybody to this series of webinars about design education at DJAD. DJAD, as you know, is the first private design college in South India, incubated by the National Institute of Design in 2004. This is the second webinar in the series of webinars that we are doing. DJAD offers interior design, communication design, user experience design, industrial design, and animation and filmmaking. Today, we are going to talk about interior design. But before we start, I think there's some small stuff that I want to talk to you about the interface that is in front of you. There's a Q&A Q&A section, which is there. You can go click on that and ask a question at any point of time if you want as we are speaking. At the right time, I'll pull up your question and probably post it to Niels, and we can continue on from there. At the end of it, if we have enough time, we'll cover as many questions as possible. And so now I'm happy to welcome Niels Schoenfelder, the Governing Council member of DJAD. He's right here on the screen. As you can see, he's an architect by training and practices in the very field of design for built environment. In other words, architecture and interior design. And its focus on spaces and objects is notable. And it's important that we talk about that. The atmospheric and the tactile are the most important categories that his work is concerned with, and we will talk about that too. He's a co-founder and managing director at Mancini Enterprises. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. It's Mancini or Mancini, Niels? Mancini. So it's Mancini Enterprises. If you guys are interested in it, you can go and take a look at it at mancini-design.com. There's work there, and you can talk about. They have offices in Chennai and Mumbai. And the team currently works on many mixed-use projects, including interior and architecture. Now, let me actually open the stuff to Niels. Niels, do you want to actually introduce yourself in a short, brief thing, and how you came into the Governing Council of DJAD, and to start with an introduction, a short introduction, please.
Sure. Thanks, Shiva. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm hoping this can be insightful for those who may consider interior design or other streams. I've been in this field for 23, 24 years now in India. Used to work in Paris and came to Pondicherry, so the French connection brought me to India, and we've been working in Coimbatore for many, many years as well, and that's the connection that brought us to DJ. We already maybe 12 or 15 years ago that we are collaborating on this governing council, and we do focus on projects that require a very considered approach from the designer. So our clients usually come with real questions concerning their sort of front-facing spaces. So if you think of as an example, a large development of buildings in an interior design scope for us would be all of the customer touch points. So the clubhouse, the lobbies, entertainment areas, sports areas, recreational areas, wherever essentially the builder creates a real space for the end consumer to spend time. Those are then scoped to us, and that applies in different project typologies. It's not just business and commercials, of course, of private as well, but also workspaces, offices that benefit from a take on spatial and lighting and acoustic and product design to not only improve productivity. That is, of course, a hope, but there is also the aspect of what does the space tell the teams themselves about their own company. So there is an awareness growing that the space I'm working in and the facilities I'm really operating and the way that feels, and not only the way that looks in terms of, what is the color, is it dark or light, the way it really feels all put together, that is the field where interior design really can contribute, because nobody else in that consultant chain is in charge of the atmospheric. There will be an acoustic consultant who can exactly calculate what is the reverberation, and that's very important too. But he's obviously not, he or she is not in charge of putting it all together. It's just in charge of acoustics. Same for lighting, same for surfaces or accessibility consultants or security consultants. And so what I may want to sort of point out here as the unique aspect of this course of interior design and that work is this need and the duty to put it all together and create something that actually directly affects the user in a more immediate way than one may think. So that's a little bit of our outlook.
So where does it start, Niels? When you get a project, just from a process perspective, where do you start? What's the beginning of a project look like? Like, let's assume that you've signed off all the paperwork and the project itself has, let's not worry too much about the proposal and blah blah.
Sure.
But if the process got to start, what's the starting point?
So it's really important to get an honest understanding of what really is at stake. Often interior design, even at sort of the client's team's end, is understood as, oh yeah, well, we need flooring and we need some color and we need some bathrooms and all of that, so we need interior design. That kind of stops short of what actually is possible. The question is not what kind of flooring and how quickly can I build it and what will it cost it. The question would be, well, what is the atmospheric quality, the feeling I can produce for the visitors or the users in that space that will support whatever my goals as a client are for the space. So if it's a little commercial place, let's say an ice cream parlor, it's not about the choice of colors, it's about creating an atmosphere where you will, as an end customer, stay longer, consume more ice cream, feel better about it, as a result of many things put together, not just the flooring or the window dressing or the AV technology that runs in the background. That is really the first question is, and therefore, okay, what is the goal? In the case of the ice cream parlor, is it purely the volume of ice cream that's sold, or is it brand building, loyalty of the customer to that ice cream brand? Is it recall value that will be Instagram ready and therefore boost visibility of this brand? And then only later the ice cream question comes in, of how much of those liters are you actually selling? So that's really the first question: is honesty and what's the goal. And then the response will be very different. If it's just about the volume of ice cream, you probably design the space different compared to a need where the brand may want to increase visibility or be able to access a new audience that so far wasn't accessed by the design sensibility. And so there really starts our thought process.
I can understand in a place like an ice cream parlor, small ice cream parlor, the intent is kind of clear. The goal can be defined much better, I'm assuming. But what happens in, like, say, a common place like a large lobby or like a common space, right? Like something that many people come in. How do you kind of define the user intent and what is the kind of behavior that you want to inculcate? Is there any method of doing it?
Well, it's methodological in the beginning as to understand what is the lobby there for, and different lobbies do different things. So you can argue that and debate that for a while, and at some point it starts to be a more, shall we say, it's a process where creative liberty, artistic liberty will start to come in, and you will deploy cultural connotations, you'll deploy technological knowledge, all sort of mixed together. It's rarely a process where everything can be pointed to as a step-by-step guide. It starts off step by step, and then the background of the designers, the research flows into it, and then it gets filtered through things like budget and accessibility of materials, and it becomes then it's a very, very rich process, in fact. Culturally,
So there are
really
two.
interesting.
Yeah, there's two aspects that you do talk about in your explanation. One of it is the atmospheric, and the other one is tactile or tactility for this stuff. Can you explain that a little more for our audience, please? What is atmospheric and what is tactility?
It's just a very simple example that I think makes my point, supports my point. And anybody and everybody, everywhere in the world, wherever you go, you walk into a space and say you are supposed to sit down for a cup of tea or a meal. It could be a very fancy restaurant, could be very, very simple roadside shop. Everybody, every human is capable of judging without thinking in the first fraction of a second which one would be the best table to sit at. And if that table is available, of course, if there are more good tables available, then your interior design already starts working. So it's not something that is for the fortunate of this world. Interior design is not something that is, to pretty up spaces that are already advantaged by virtue of economic activity. Is actually something very fundamental, almost primordial, that connects to our ergonomic as well as social interaction patterns that everybody carries along in their not only mind but even in their body. So the distance I'm sitting in a station to the next person waiting, what is comfortable, what's not comfortable, shows how far and how important interior design, or the strong reactions to these things when they work well or not well, shows how important interior design is. So that is and then that expands into the atmospheric. And atmospheric obviously consists of something that cannot be fully described by the sum of the parts. It's acoustic. If it's too loud, I can't in my school classroom. If it's too loud and the teacher has to constantly raise her voice or his voice, there will be a tense atmosphere throughout my school day, and it's guaranteed that the teaching experience and learning experience will be not as good as a classroom that has a better acoustic. But it's not just the measurable dB level or the reverb, is actually the psychological fallout of the teacher having to raise the voice that screws up or improves the atmospheric quality of my entire school day. So if you multiply that into millions of students and teachers, it becomes evident how fundamentally important this is.
And tactility, Niels?
Is a part of that. It's essentially saying that we are not only visual people, although we are maybe, especially in recent times, pushed to believe that because our screen is supposed to do everything for us. But well, that's not true. I mean, we have full bodies and we have ergonomics and we have sensorial abilities that influence our well-being and our ability to work or to concentrate or to relax or to find our way in the world, literally with all our senses. So that's where that aspect comes in.
Let's switch to pedagogy a bit. So what are the foundational important skills that students need to build in the first few months of learning in interior design, or first year of learning in interior design?
Well, there's the course that DJ offers that critically addresses the elements of design. It's about color and proportion and materiality, all of that. But I think another step initially is a very important step is to realize what all spheres of life are actually impacted by this chosen field of interior design, to then realize how much information is already available in every student's experience that then can be unlocked as being relevant for the course. If I've never really thought about, let's say, the classroom example, if I never really thought about the noise level or the fan swirling in these, in our summer hot classrooms, and I start to realize how the different reverb time would change that, then I can bring to the table my experience in other spaces where I felt that the acoustics were better, or I knew that because there were mats on the floor or absorbing furniture that helped along. All those experiences then will become also accessible as part of your initial learning. So I think it's a combination of realizing what's at stake, really, and learning the fundamentals of design that the foundational course is anyway offering.
So as a potential student, do you think it's possible for me to see or understand that I would want to go into interior design? What are the stuff that I need to check in myself to see whether I'm tuned to go to interior design? Is it a possibility at all?
Yeah, I do think that a heightened interest and sensibility can be brought along and can sort of precondition one student more than the other. But it's not something that is, there's no, I don't see, there are no not learnable talents are required. I think all of this is because it's so fundamentally connected to our sensorial world and the perception thereof and the experience thereof that everybody has. It's about how quickly can I access that? How can I start to verbalize it, discuss with my peers, and take these very often these topics seem so mundane or so under the radar of what is loaded with information. If you compare the interior design and the room of a user interface design on a screen, the room doesn't want to tell you, doesn't want to call to action, has no buttons to click, has no music playing at the same time, has no scrolling that can be animated in certain way. The room is a much quieter thing and maybe more understated experiential space. And so one has to realize that that doesn't mean that it should not be taken serious compared to other design tasks, like, for example, user interface design.
So what tools and methods do students need to learn during the process of learning interior design? What are the key tools or even methodologies or processes that they learn during interior design?
There are many levels to it. I think the first one is this sort of sensorial, experiential, ergonomical level, and it would obviously make sense to learn that by experiencing. So classes that emphasize experiential discussion on space, movement, ergonomics, all of the senses would be the first step. And then the next step would be, well, how is all this tinted through culture? So there's travel, understanding how different cultures, different societies, different professions, subsets in society function. What are the cultural connotations that I need to know that I can then redeploy in interior design? Color is highly coded, for example, and so are historic cues in a way that hark back to cultural space. And there, the field is unlimited. It's an absolute fascinating field of study because it does connect us right away to all kinds of histories, not only history of design, but also history of societies at large, politics, what space, what kind of politics, what is authority, how is it expressed in space. Can go back to the same classroom example. If there's a frontal sort of arrangement, the teacher is the boss, and then there are rows of students who have to listen, is one way of teaching, and the space reflects and enforces that authority of that teacher. Or if you sit in groups around and scatter, it's totally different layout, totally different furniture required, totally different lighting required for that, because now I need light on my own table or on my group table, not only on the teacher. And so one can see how that is all linked up to our ways of structuring society. Fascinating.
And so how is like a real world exposure? I know that you're kind of touched upon the stuff with culture. The idea of industrial exposure, I mean, in two ways, right? One is to actually understand the resources available, or even from a colors, material, finish, and possibilities that you can do use, and that's one part. The other part is how do you want to understand the industry outside and what it's demanding so that you can provide them. How can that be, and how is it built into the curriculum?
Well, maybe the most radical step in that are the internships. To go out and actually be in space with people in studios and work on these wide variety of tasks. And because it's such a wide requirement, every studio, every company, whether large or small, will have a different direction, different typologies of projects that will teach completely different, will bring completely different exposure to this field. So the more one can do of that, the better, I feel, to really understand what are the processes that can professionally be functioning. There are lots of different processes. There will be studios who will run a more efficient process, much quicker projects. You will find that within 45 days, you'll have to fit out an entire office for 200 people. So it's a very, very high-paced environment, and you still have to make decisions or bring to the project what only interior designer can bring. And then there an office for the same 200 people that will take 3 years to do. So you can imagine how different at the designers and the processes will be given these different economic project circumstances. Radical, it's, if you think about that.
Right. Niels, you worked in multiple geographies. So one of the questions always is about how do you connect these local sensibilities, especially from a sustainability perspective, and how do you bring that into the curriculum so that people are, of course, culture, context, and the sustainability piece is local relevant? How do you do that?
Well, studies like the local outreach, rural studies, what is fundamentally in society understood as being beautiful, useful, what are the tools of the trades actually executing the interior spaces, what are the materials available, and all of those have cultural legacy and relevance in localized areas. So what is relevant in Rajasthan may be different from what's relevant in Tamil Nadu. Craft clusters are a big topic in the curriculum as well. That doesn't mean that that's something to be integrated in the interior design without a process of digesting it. That means that the craft studies are there to understand the fundamental historic and physical connotations to material and ways of constructing and ways of being. And then those will have to be interpreted for each project. Those can also just trigger creative thought. They don't have to necessarily be worked on in an academic fashion, where you have to find a certain craft in a certain form for a certain project. It can also be just a sort of source of inspiration in larger means. But without those, you'll miss the local relevance.
Right. And from a, if I actually have a scale or a slide that's between expressive versus highly functional, that kind of a method of looking at that slider, and like, is there viewpoints on, or does the space and what the context is kind of dictate how expressive you can be and how functional you have to be when you design it?
I think so. I think that slider is exactly what has to respond to the initial inquiry or what the project has to deliver. So I think if you do the job well, then you are able to precisely position that slider through all of the decision making throughout the process, and make sure that is exactly where the end user or the client needs that level of expression or functionality to be. If you go back to the ice cream parlor, and the discussion was thorough in the beginning with the brand owners, with the stakeholders, and they have realized and verbalized the fact that no, we actually are not so hung up on doubling the sales volume right away. We are actually looking to access a newer, say, younger or older audience. That's our primary concern. Then that gives you all of the clues you need to position the slider for that design, such that you deliver. So if it's the younger audience that was supposed to be accessed, then maybe the expressive slider has to go up, so that there is just this joy of being in a space that's unusual, punchy, delivers a high energy element that then most likely will trigger a lot of photography, Instagram posting, brand awareness, and all of that. And that's you delivering the access to a younger audience through interior design.
That kind of segues nicely into a question that's popped up in the Q&A, right? So, does one interior designer specialize in a certain kind of space, that entire place in the slider? Does that become a specialization of sort? Or should one learn to work on a range of projects, from designing homes to offices to shop interiors to, common spaces to, what do you think is the right method of approach?
Both certainly exist, especially in workplace design. There's a huge specialization possible. It's a huge field of study where there's scientific measurement of all kinds of criteria in workspaces that then are being analyzed and published in serious literature for interior designers to deliver the better workspace, because there's a lot at stake. Large companies, large organizations will obviously benefit from a very, very precisely tuned slider with the just limitation of workspace design. So there are specializations. However, they are all fundamentally hinging on an ability to understand, question the brief, bring out the real stakes, and be able to deploy using the palette of the first year foundational design, using those tools, using the cultural contextual understanding to formulate answers. Then once that is achieved, that foundational ability, one can choose to specialize or not, and both are absolutely valid career paths.
There's another question from Janak, who's asking, how do you incorporate local materials or processes to make the craft more sustainable, like using clay or craft traditions, or whatever is relevant today in interior design?
Well, that's obviously coming to the sort of professional duty or the professional ethics of interior design, any design, really, is to say that whatever the task may be, whatever the ambition of the project may be, we'll have to ensure that we deliver that in the most sustainable manner, and therefore be very careful in planning where things come from and how they're made and how much energy is embodied in them and all of that. So there could be sort of self-imposed, that the client may not even ask for it, but there could be the self-imposed rule that, well, before I go anywhere and use chemically harmful paints or imported fittings, I have to double check if I cannot get all of that, say in a radius of 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers around the construction site. So that's, I think, good professional practice that relates to ethics in today's world, which will be taught in Leisure Academy as well. There are courses that will touch upon these questions, and I think that's the equivalent of professional ethics in lawyer or a doctor, we do have these as well, even though it comes across as more free or more creative, and therefore there's less of that, but actually that's not true.
Right. I think for the past couple of years, I haven't been in a single webinar or a panel without artificial intelligence thrown into the question at some point of time. And I was waiting for that, and that question has popped up too. So, yeah. So how do you see technology like AI or VR and AR changing the role of interior designers in the next decade?
Well, I think there's one point that for me is my main concern, or also the main potential of this development, is that most probably within maybe 6 months or a year, it doesn't matter, the factual global average knowledge of interior design, the factual aspects like, say, acoustic, levels of acoustic, or lighting layouts that'll have to relate to electrical layouts, that have to relate to security camera layouts, whatever that means. All of that factual stuff is essentially going to be available to anybody. And so when earlier students had a clear benefit in learning the rules of these sort of subtasks of interior design and being able to deploy them, that is now less and less important, because the good student will learn the fundamentals, but will get the technical, factual input anyway, constantly double-checked by being able to use AI properly. And that frees up time, and that's the fundamental point I'm coming to, that frees up time to actually think about and be able to make proposals that concern the cultural relevance of our work. That is going to be much harder for the AI. I'm not saying impossible, I don't know where this is going, but it's going to be much harder for an AI system to spit out that answer. What should we build? Not how should we build, it's going to become easier and easier. But what and why should we build is going to be important. That's where cultural context, understanding of history of design, history of craft, history of technology, the larger societal context of how we live in spaces becomes absolutely fundamentally important.
That kind of, it's going to be the end of time. So I'll close with this question. One of the questions that have been asked quite a few times. What is an entry-level job for somebody who's done interior design at DZAD? What's a typical entry-level job, and what's expected of them?
Well, that's right now changing because of this, the last question we just discussed, because of the ability to create inputs with AI at the technical level. That used to be the entry-level job. Used to be to understand the project, not to create the project, but to understand what was the goal, what was the conceptual steps taken, and then fill those in with the adequate technical responses and solutions. And that is now changing drastically, because a good part of those technical solutions will be aided by or replaced by AI. So in at least for our practice, the ability of entry-level interior designer, we will be looking for more and more. We have been looking for anyway, but now even more so, will be the ability to relate to the artistic is one word, but also to the what you call techno-aesthetic correlation of the inputs required. AI can say that this CCTV camera is not required, but AI cannot talk with the client about the ethics of having the CCTV camera in the first place. So the ability to understand the context, the client communication, and techno-aesthetic detailing will have to shift to even the younger interior designers, the ability to do so, which points to the need that during your studies at DJ elsewhere, one will need to take all of those courses extra serious that earlier used to be very important, but sometimes undervalued. For example, history of design. In my opinion, is now going to be more and more important. To understand it, read it, and be able to deploy it, communicate it, ask the right questions, be critical, because ChatGPT is just going to find everything you say fantastic. I mean, we all know how it responds all the time. Whatever you ask, it says such a great question, even if the question is stupid. So it's a critical partner for a client, for a contractor, for the finance people in a process of interior design is going to be more and more important.
And what's a typical growth path? If that's the entry point, Niels, what's the growth path? What will become of interior designers over, say, the first 5 years of their work? At the end of it, where would they be?
Well, it depends on whether or not one chooses to work in a sort of specialist environment, like we discussed earlier. There are large design studios, even global design studios, that have shops in India and elsewhere, where your career path can be very, very structured, very corporate, very laser focused, with the opportunities and the pay that relates to that, but also with the boundaries that come with that. And one of the opposing ways would be start out on your own, not be a specialist immediately, touch upon other areas, for example, scenography, design for, I mean, interior design is relevant for not only a house or a office or an ice cream shop, it's relevant for TV, for theater, for filmmaking, for photographers, stage setting, and so on and so forth. So there's a very, very, very large set of opportunities that I think need to be studied as well during your actual course, to understand what they demand, to maybe go and spend a couple of days just to see what's going on, to understand the breadth of what actually is possible in this field. It's huge.
And I guess that brings us to the end of the conversation, Niels. I think we've had a pretty long session too. And Niels is joining us from Paris today. And thank you for your time, Niels. And we will continue this conversation if and when possible. And when you're around here, when you come to DJAD, hopefully the parents and students who listen to this can meet you too and ask more questions if at all there are any. Thank you for your time.
Shiva, absolute pleasure. And I'll be happy to answer questions by email as well. So if there's a need for prospective students to engage a little further, happy to do so.
Thank you. And the audience, if you can join us again at 6 p.m. next Saturday, we'll be discussing communication design with Sarita. If there are any changes, please look out for the social media handles of DJAD and you'll see the changes if at all there are any, and announcements will be made pretty soon. Thank you. Thank you for everybody's time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.